The laughter rolled through the barn like tumbleweed caught in a dust devil, careless and mean. The annual charity rodeo dance was supposed to be all light and music, but every small town's got its pack of jackals. And tonight they were circling. Pick any girl you want, one of them sneered, half drunk on cheap whiskey and ego. Their hats sat crooked, their smiles cruel. Eli Boone didn't much care for their kind. He stood by the rail, boots planted, hat low, watching the mess of people spinning and laughing on the dance floor. His hands were calloused from ranch work. His shirt smelled faintly of saddle soap and smoke. He hadn't come for trouble. He never did, but trouble had a way of finding him, just like the long, empty roads back home. When they mocked him, "Go on, cowboy, pick one," he felt his jaw tighten. His gaze swept over the crowd once, slow and steady, and stopped on her. She stood alone near the far end of the dance floor, pretending not to notice. Big girl. Not just in body, but in presence. Shoulders straight, chin high, though her eyes betrayed a lifetime of being picked last. Her dress was plain denim, her boots old but polished. A woman who knew her worth even if others didn't, single quotes, tidn, single quotes. T.I. lifted his hand and pointed. "Her," he said. His voice was steady, low as thunder. "The one you boys said was too big for the dance." The barn went quiet for a beat, like even the band forgot to play. Then someone laughed, nervous and high-pitched. But Eli didn't move. He just kept looking at her steady. "Sure." She blinked, unsure if he was serious. But then he started walking, his spurs whispering against the wooden floorboards, the crowd parting like a slow tide. He stopped in front of her and tipped his hat. "Ma'am," he said softly, "would you dance with me?" She hesitated. Her name was June Walker, though most folks just called her Big June, not unkindly, but not kindly either. Her daddy had run the local feed store before it shut down. She worked long hours at the diner now, carrying plates heavier than most folks' pride. Life had made her tough but not unbreakable. "You don't have to do this," she murmured, eyes flicking to the men still watching, still smirking. Eli's smile was small but real. "Ain't doing anything I don't want to." For a moment, neither moved. Then she nodded, a single quiet nod, and placed her hand in his. His palm was rough, warm. He led her to the floor as the band found their place again. A slow waltz humming through the barn. They moved easy, hesitant at first, then finding rhythm. Eli wasn't a talker, but he looked at her like she was worth the space she took up. Maybe for the first time she felt that was true. By the time the song ended, the laughter had died down. Folks turned back to their drinks, their gossip, their own little worlds. But something had shifted. The air felt clearer. Eli led her off the floor, still holding her hand. "You dance real fine, Miss June." She smiled, then soft, shy, but bright as sunrise after rain. "You ain't too bad yourself, Mr. Boone." He tipped his hat again. "Guess I'll take that as a compliment." Outside, the night stretched wide and star-studded, the kind of sky you only see in the open country. The lights from the barn spilled onto the dirt road, and for a heartbeat, everything felt still. Real. June looked up at him. "Why'd you do it?" she asked quietly. "You don't even know me." Eli took his time answering, gaze fixed on the horizon. "Reckon I don't need to know you to see what's plain. You got a kind of strength folks don't understand. They laugh at what they can't carry." Her throat tightened. "You talk like a man twice your age." He smiled. "Been working cattle since I was 12. Life teaches you early." June laughed, a sound like the first crack of donut for the first time that night. It didn't hurt to be seen. When she finally walked home under that big Texas sky, her boots crunching gravel, she kept hearing his voice. "Her, the one you boys said was too big." Maybe, she thought, too big wasn't something to hide anymore. The sun hadn't yet climbed fully over the horizon, but June Walker was already on her way to the diner. The gravel crunching under her boots like tiny drums of morning. The diner smelled of black coffee, bacon, and the faint tang of grease, comforting in a way that reminded her of her daddy's feed store, back when life seemed simpler. She rubbed her arms against the morning chill, still thinking about the night before. Eli Boone was out there somewhere too. Probably already on the ranch checking fences or chasing loose cattle. She wondered if he thought about her the way she thought about him. The laugh he gave, that small, crooked smile, the way he had looked at her when he pointed across the barn, kept replaying in her mind. She shook her head. Ridiculous. She didn't know him. "Morning," June called Marla, the cook, from behind the counter, slapping a rag down with practiced ease. "You look like you've seen a ghost." June smiled faintly. "Something like that. I'm fine, Marla." Marla eyed her for a long second, then shook her head. "Hung. Sure. Don't tell me that Boone boy gave you one of those looks again." June's ears warmed. Maybe, she admitted, ducking her head. Marla snorted. Figured. That boy's got eyes like a hawk, and he don't miss a thing. You better watch yourself, June. He might just sweep you off your feet before you even realize it. June laughed softly, stirring her coffee. She wasn't sure if it was excitement or nervousness, or both. A few towns over, Eli Boone had a reputation. Quiet, strong, fair, could handle a horse, a fence, and a herd of cattle like no one else. And he had a way of looking at people that made them feel seen, not the laughable, whispering kind of seen but, truly, deeply recognized. She didn't see him that morning, not on the main road, not near the diner, not anywhere she walked past. Still, the memory of him pointing at her, steady and deliberate, filled her chest with warmth. It wasn't until later that morning, when she was rolling silverware in cloth napkins behind the counter, that the door creaked open and he stepped in. Boots scuffed the floorboards, hat in hand, and that presence quiet, grounded, real filled the diner. He wore a worn leather jacket over a flannel shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow. Sunlight caught the lines of his face, and the faint dust on his boots told a story of mornings on the open range. Morning, Miss June, he said, voice low, gravelly, the kind that felt like a warm blanket in the cold. June's hands froze mid. Mr. Boone, she said, her voice catching slightly. He smiled just a little. A curve of mouth and cheek that didn't need more words. He stepped up to the counter. Coffee, black, strong. Coming right up, June said, trying to keep her tone steady. She poured it carefully, hands slightly shaking, though she didn't want him to see. He leaned on the counter, elbows resting, and just waited, comfortable in the silence. After a moment, he said, last night was different. His eyes held hers. Don't get asked to dance much. June snorted softly. Not really. He nodded, slow, understanding. People say things about you they don't mean. I don't pay much mind to folks who judge what they don't understand. June's throat tightened. Few people had ever said something like that to her. Most either laughed along or ignored the feelings behind her broad shoulders. Eli Boone, standing there in the morning sunlight, made it feel like someone noticed without expecting her to shrink. Thank you, she whispered. Don't mention it, he said. Then he looked out the window toward the dusty road that led to his ranch. I'll be heading back to fix a fence later. If you're not busy, maybe you could ride along. There's a stretch of open land I could show you. Quiet, good for clearing the head. June hesitated. A ride with him alone was daring, maybe even reckless. But she found herself nodding before she could stop herself. I think I'd like that. The diner door swung open again, letting in a gust of wind and dust from the road. But inside, the warmth of coffee, quiet understanding, and something new and tentative hung between them, heavier than any words they might speak. For June, it was the first time in a long time that being noticed didn't feel like a trap. For Eli, it was the first time someone's strength didn't intimidate him, called to him, made him steady in a way he hadn't felt in years. Outside, the morning sun baked the streets of their small town, ordinary and forgiving all at once, and between the smell of coffee, the taste of possibility, and the quiet of two lives beginning to overlap, a small hope took root. Maybe being too big didn't mean being too much. Maybe it just meant you hadn't met the right person yet. And Eli Boone, steady, unshakable, might just be that person. The sun sat low in the sky, painting the plains gold and amber. When June slid into the worn saddle Eli had set out for her, the smell of leather, horse sweat, and the dry wind carried the scent of the open rangeal, live and endless. Eli's horse, a chestnut mare with a stubborn streak, shifted under him, ears flicking, and he offered June a steadying hand. You comfortable? He asked. His voice was low, measured. The way it always seemed like he weighed his words before letting them fall. I think so, June said, her fingers gripping the reins a little tighter than necessary. She was used to working, to carrying more than she wanted, but riding wasn't something she did often. Eli noticed her hesitation but didn't comment. He just gave her a reassuring nod. The first stretch of trail was quiet. Dust rose in lazy clouds behind them, the only sounds the creak of leather and the distant calls of hawks circling above. The landscape rolled with gentle hills and scattered mesquite trees, nothing like the constricted streets of town. Out here, the world felt bigger, freer and somehow safer. So, June began, trying to sound casual. This is your land. Eli glanced over, a small smile tugging at his lips. Part of it, mostly, it's where the fences need fixing. He flicked a glance ahead. And sometimes, it's where you go to clear your head. June considered that there was a quiet bravery in him, silent, unassuming. She'd met plenty of men who talked too much to cover up the fear in their eyes. Not Eli. He was steady, rooted, like the mesquite trees dotting the hills. They rode side by side in silence for a while. The air was warm, dry, carrying the scent of dust and wild grass. And then, without warning, Eli's mare shied. June's heart leaped. The ground shifted under hooves, sudden and chaotic. She fought to keep her balance, hands white on the reins. "Whoa, girl. Easy," she shouted, her voice cracking with panic. Eli's hand shot out, steady, his horse angled to block hers, chest brushing against her shoulder. "Take a deep breath. You got this." For a moment, the world felt like it was tilting. June's chest tightened. Her stomach knotted, but then she felt his presence, solid and grounding. She followed his calm, took the deep breath, and the mare relaxed. "You're okay," Eli said quietly, almost like a whisper for just her ears. "See, not so bad." June laughed nervously, the sound shaky but genuine. "Not bad," he says. "I almost fell on my face." "You didn't," Eli replied, his smile teasing but steady. "And that's what counts." They rode on, slower now, the sun dipping toward the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges. The wind carried their laughter. The sound of two people slowly shedding the armor they wore so carefully. "You know," June said after a while, voice quieter, "I never really get to do this. Just ride without thinking about who's watching or what they're saying about me." Eli glanced at her. "Funny, that's exactly how I feel when I'm out here. Nothing else matters. Just the land, the horse, the wind." The honesty in his words struck her. She wanted to tell him everything, the teasing, the mocking, the nights spent feeling too big, too heavy, too much, but she didn't. Not yet. Somehow, in this quiet stretch of range, under the fading sun, she felt it didn't need to be said. He already knew. As they reached a ridge, Eli stopped his horse. The land stretched endlessly below them, valleys and streams winding like silver ribbons through the amber plains. The air was thick with dust and the scent of wild sage. And for the first time in a long time, June felt small but not powerless, part of something larger, seen and held by someone steady. "You like it?" Eli asked, his voice soft, almost reverent. June nodded. "Yeah, I do." He gave a small, satisfied smile. "Good. Figured you might." They stayed like that a while, just breathing, just looking. No one else mattered out here. No ridicule, no judgment, no whispered words behind backs. Only the horses, the sky, and each other. When they finally rode back, the sun had nearly vanished, leaving only the afterglow of orange and violet bleeding into the horizon. The barn lights flickered in the distance as they approached town. Small and safe against the growing night, Dawn glanced at Eli, heart light in a way she hadn't felt in years. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" he asked, though his eyes said he already knew. "For showing me this. Showing me that there's more than what people say I can be." Eli tipped his hat. The gesture small but deliberate. "Ain't nothing to thank me for. You just needed a chance to see it yourself." June's smile lingered long after they dismounted. She ran her hand over the worn leather of the saddle, feeling the warmth of the day and the strength of his presence in a way that was more than physical. It was grounding, like the earth itself. And as she walked home that night, her boots scuffing the familiar gravel, she realized something. Maybe being too big wasn't a burden. Maybe it was a gift, and someone like Eli Boone could see it without fear or mockery. And maybe, just maybe, love was waiting somewhere out there, quiet, steady, and real, like the wind across the open plains. The following week stretched across the small town like the slow drag of a wagon wheel over dusty roads. June found herself thinking about Eli Boone more than she expected, more than she admitted even to herself. The barn dance and their first ride had been a spark, but now the warmth lingered in her chest like a fire refusing to die, quiet but steady. She poured coffee at the diner, her movements, automatic eyes occasionally drifting to the window. The road beyond shimmered in the morning heat, and she imagined him riding toward her, dust curling behind his horse. She laughed softly at herself. Ridiculous. He had his ranch. She had her diner. And life went on regardless of stolen glances or daydreams. But Eli didn't just appear in her thoughts. He appeared in person too. That Thursday, the bell above the diner door jingled, and she looked up to see him leaning against the doorway, boots dusty, hat slightly tipped, eyes calm but steady like he belonged there, even if he didn't belong anywhere but out in the open. "Morning, Miss June," he greeted. "Double quotes Mr. Boone," she said, a little breathless despite herself. Morning. He slid into the booth across from her, tipping his hat back. Figured you might need a break. I got the morning shift covered if you want to step out for a bit. June blinked. A break. Alone with him. Her heart thumped erratically. I suppose I could, she said. Good, he said simply. Standing. Meet me by the corral in 10. By the time she walked out to the corral, he had saddled his horse. Eli's mare snorted, and he offered June a calm nod. Thought we could check the west fence today, he said. Got a few boards loose from the last storm? June hesitated. Fixing fences wasn't glamorous. It was hard, heavy work, and she wasn't sure she wanted to prove herself in front of him just yet. Eli seemed to notice. It's okay if you just ride along. I won't judge. The offer, casual and steady, made her chest tighten. She nodded. All right. The ride out was quiet. The rhythm of hooves over dry earth punctuated by wind rustling through sagebrush. Eli finally broke the silence. Jano, people round here, they can be mean without even realizing it. They'll laugh, they'll gossip, but most of it comes from fear. Fear of someone who doesn't fit their idea of small town life. June listened, watching the dust swirl in the late afternoon sun. Fear of someone like me. He glanced at her, a slow smile tugging at his lips. Exactly like you. You're loud, strong, unapologetic in a way they can't handle. Doesn't make you wrong. Just makes them uncomfortable. She swallowed. Most days, she tried to ignore the whispers, the sideways glances at the diner, the smirks at town events. But hearing him say it aloud, as if it were truth without judgment, was different. It made her shoulders feel less heavy. As they reached the fence, Eli dismounted, hands on his hips. You wanna help, or just watch? June hesitated, then slid off her horse. Her hands grazed the rough wood, arms flexing as she lifted boards into place under Eli's instruction. It was hard work, the kind that left muscles sore and skin scratched, but it felt honest, grounding. Eli moved beside her, quiet encouragement rather than instruction, letting her find the rhythm herself. You're really strong, he said finally as she hammered the last board into place. June laughed, a little breathless. I have to be. He studied her for a moment, eyes softening. Doesn't mean you gotta do it all alone? The words hit her unexpectedly. All her life, she had carried weight alone, judgments, expectations, her own self-doubt. But here, Eli was offering a hand without taking over, acknowledging her strength while reminding her she didn't have to bear everything alone. A sudden gust of wind kicked up dust, ruffling her hair, and she laughed again. Eli laughed too, low and warm, and for a fleeting moment, the weight of the world felt a little lighter. By the time they rode back to town, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in molten oranges and deep purples. Dust clung to their clothes and horses, but neither seemed to care. Side by side, they rode in a quiet understanding, a tentative trust building in silence and shared work. Later that evening, June stood at the diner window, watching the horizon darken. She felt the ache of anticipation, of possibility. Eli Boone had entered her life with no promises. No grand declarations, just quiet recognition, steady presence, and a simple truth. Maybe being too big wasn't a flaw. Maybe it was a strength. And maybe, just maybe, someone like Eli could see a tansy her without hesitation. The town had a way of noticing everything, or at least pretending to. Word traveled fast, sometimes faster than the wind over the plains, and June Walker was learning that the same people who laughed behind her back could turn their curiosity into scrutiny. It started small, a glance here, a whisper there. As she and Eli walked down Main Street after a late evening ride, she caught snippets. That Boone boy, and her, don't know what she thinks she's doing. Too big, too bold, too everything. June tried to ignore it, tried to let the wind carry it past her like dust over the prairie. But words have a way of sticking, seeping into the cracks of pride and self-doubt, especially when they echo what you've always heard about yourself. Eli noticed. He always noticed. They were walking side by side when he finally spoke, quiet but firm. Don't let 'em get to you, he said. His gaze was steady, unwavering. They're scared of what they don't understand, that's all. June bit her lip. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that his words were enough to keep the whispers from burrowing under her skin. But a part of her still remembered every laugh, every mocking remark. It's not just them, she said softly. It's me too. Eli stopped walking. His hand found hers, fingers curling around hers with a steady warmth. You see what you are? Strong, honest, brave, more than any of them will ever be. And more than most realize about themselves. June's throat tightened. No one had ever looked at her like that, not like she was enough, not like she could stand tall without apology. And yet, the town continued to murmur, and shadows of doubt lingered. The tension broke later that week at the ranch. Eli had asked her to help with a small herd, checking for strays near the western hills. June rode along confidently, though a knot of anxiety lingered in her stomach. She loved being out on the range with Eli, the wide open land making her feel alive in a way that nothing else could. But that afternoon, one of the younger ranch hands, a boy named Carter, tried to stir trouble. "So," he said, leaning against a fence post, smirk playing on his lips, "the Boone boy's got himself a big city girlfriend, huh? Or is he just feeling sorry for her?" June's jaw tightened, cheeks burning not with embarrassment, but anger. "She's not," Eli started, but she cut him off with a sharp glance. "I'm not anyone's charity," she said, voice firm, carrying over the wind. "And I don't need your approval, Carter." Eli's hand found hers, thumb brushing over knuckles. He didn't need to speak. His presence alone steadied her, reminded her she wasn't alone in facing the judgment. Carter shrugged and walked off, but the sting of town gossip lingered. That night, back at the diner, June sat quietly, stirring her coffee. Eli slid into the booth across from her, boots scuffed, hat in hand, eyes soft with concern. "Don't let M define you," he said simply. "You're bigger than their words, bigger than their gossip, bigger than anything they throw at you. I see it, I see you." June's eyes glistened with the faintest sheen of tears. It wasn't pity she felt, it was recognition, validation she'd longed for without knowing she needed it. I want to be stronger," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "Stronger than what I think I can be." Eli reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "You're stronger than you know. And if you let me, I'll be right here, riding with you through it." The wind outside rattled the windows, carrying the scents of dust and sage. But inside, there was a warmth that belonged to them alone. Two people standing together against whispers, judgments, and self-doubt. The town could murmur all it wanted, but June felt something deeper now, truth she could hold on to. Strength wasn't measured by silence or invisibility. Strength was standing tall, being seen, and letting someone steady beside you matter more than the murmurs behind your back. And as she left the diner that night, boots crunching on the gravel, June realized she was beginning to understand. The wind might carry the town's words, but it couldn't carry away the bond she shared with Eli, the quiet, unshakable presence that told her she was enough. Even if the world insisted she was too big, she was finally beginning to feel she was just right. The sky darkened. In the afternoon, like a bruise spreading over the horizon, clouds rolled in fast, heavy with rain and the distant rumble of thunder. Eli Boone's brow furrowed as he scanned the pastures. The storm wasn't just a nuisance, it was dangerous. Loose fences could break, strays could wander, and horses, like all creatures, feared lightning. June tightened her coat, gripping the reins of her horse as the wind picked up. The dust she had grown used to turned to grit, biting her face, and the first fat drops of rain began to fall. Cold and insistent. "We gotta check the west herd," Eli said, voice low over the wind. "Storm's coming fast." June hesitated, her heart thudded, part fear, part exhilaration. She had never faced a storm like this on horseback, not alone, and the thought of something going wrong made her stomach twist. "You'll be fine," Eli said, reading her hesitation. "I won't let anything happen to you." The words steadied her, as if the wind itself had paused to listen. She nodded and followed him, hooves sinking slightly in the wet earth, rain soaking her hair, clothes sticking to her like a second skin. The west pasture was chaos. Horses stirred nervously, ears back, nostrils flaring. One of the young colts had broken free from the corral, galloping in wide circles, panic in its eyes. Eli's voice cut through the storm, calm but commanding. "Easy, easy now." June found herself alongside him, mirroring his movements, holding the reins with hands that shook but didn't falter. Together, they guided the frightened colt back toward the corral. Rain pelted them, wind tore at their jackets, and the sky rumbled with a sound that shook the very ground. At one point, a bolt of lightning struck close enough to knock both of them from their horses. They hit the mud hard, hearts hammering. June's hand scraped and stung, her leg throbbing where it had hit the saddle horn. Eli's arm was across her back before she could even cry out. "You okay?" he shouted, voice steady above the storm. "I think so," she gasped. He helped her to her feet, checking quickly for injuries, then offered his hand. "We're in this together," he said simply. "Always." There was no bravado in his words, only the quiet certainty that came from years of living with the land, the animals, and the dangers that came with both. And for the first time, June felt that same certainty rising inside her, not fearlessness, but trust in herself, and in him. By the time the storm began to ease, the pasture was under control. The colt was safe, the herd calm, and the fences that had threatened to break were mended, thanks to their combined effort. They sat on their horses, drenched, mud-splattered, hearts still racing, and let the wind carry away the last of the storm. June looked at Eli, her chest tight with something she hadn't named before. Gratitude, relief, something deeper, more tender. You never let go, do you? She whispered. He shook his head, a small smile tugging at his lips despite the mud and rain. Not when it matters. Not when it's you. For a moment, the storm's fury felt like a distant memory. The rain had stopped, leaving only the fresh scent of wet earth and the quiet whisper of wind through the grass. They rode back to the ranch side by side, both exhausted, both exhilarated, but something between them had changed. The storm had stripped away fear and pretension, leaving only truth. Courage isn't the absence of fire, it's facing it together. Later, at the barn, Eli tended to the horses while June brushed off the mud and checked their gear. She caught her reflection in the stable window, hair plastered to her face, eyes bright, cheeks flushed. She looked alive. You did good today, Eli said, watching her carefully. Better than good. You were steady, strong. June laughed softly, but it was a laugh with weight behind it. A laugh of someone who had survived fear and found herself stronger than she thought. Guess being too big has its uses after all, she said, a teasing edge in her tone. Eli's grin was slow, knowing, and he tipped his hat. Don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the plains in a golden afterglow, June realized that strength wasn't about size or appearance. It was about standing up in the storm, literal or metaphorical, and holding your ground, especially with someone who believed in you by your side. That night, she went to bed exhausted but unafraid. The storm had passed, and in its place was a new kind of hope, something steady and real. She could face the world, whispers and judgments included, as long as she had that kind of strength and someone like Eli Boone riding beside her. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of sage and wet earth after the storm. June Walker stood on the porch of the diner, mug of coffee in hand, watching the first sunlight hit the plains. Everything seemed sharper, clearer, the hills, the fences, even the distant silhouette of Eli Boone on his horse, riding toward her as if the world itself were parting to make room for him. The week after the storm had been quieter, almost surreal. The town's whispers hadn't stopped entirely, but they seemed smaller somehow, less powerful, like paper in the wind. And June felt it too, something shifting inside her. She had faced fear, faced judgment, faced herself, and she had emerged steadier, stronger, unashamed. Eli swung down from his horse and approached, boots crunching on the gravel. His hat was tipped low against the sun, eyes hidden for a moment, but when he lifted it, the familiar calm warmth of his gaze met hers. Morning, he said simply. Morning, she replied, her voice steady, even as her heart did a little flip. He didn't speak immediately. He just stood there, horse swaying gently, wind tugging at his coat. Then he smiled, slow and knowing. You ever think about how far we've come? From the barn dance to, well, this. June laughed softly, a sound that carried hope and recognition. Every day. And I never thought I don't know, feel like I belong anywhere, honestly, but out here, with you, I feel it. Eli's smile softened, and he held out a hand. Then don't let anyone take that from you, and don't hide it, not ever. June's fingers brushed his, then gripped firmly. It was a small gesture, but it carried everything: trust, acknowledgement, and the unspoken promise of standing together. They rode out together, the plains stretching endlessly ahead, golden in the morning light. No fences, no storm, no judgment could reach them here. The wind whispered over the hills, carrying the faint scent of rain and sage. Along the trail, Eli nudged his horse closer to hers. You're stronger than you think, June. And not just out there, he said, gesturing vaguely to the wide-open land, but here. He tapped his chest lightly, and here. June felt her chest tighten. The words weren't empty flattery, they were recognition. She realized the truth she had been running toward all her life. Strength wasn't just in muscles or grit or size. It was in heart, in courage, in standing fully in who you were, and letting someone beside you matter more than fear or judgment. They reached a rise overlooking the town. From here, everything was visible. The diner, the ranch, the dusty roads, the people who had once whispered. June didn't feel their judgment anymore. She felt gratitude instead for the town that tested her, for the challenges that pushed her, and most of all, for Eli Boone, who had seen her clearly from the start. "You ready?" he asked, voice soft, carrying the warmth of the rising sun. June nodded, heart full. "I think I finally am." Together, they rode down the slope, toward the town, heads high, hearts steady, and boots kicking up dust in a rhythm that matched their own. The people on the streets paused, some surprised, some curious, but June didn't care. For the first time, she belonged not because anyone else had decided it for her, but because she had claimed it herself. Eli rode beside her, easy and sure, and when he touched her hand, she squeezed back. There was no shame in her size, no doubt in her strength, just a steady presence. A bond forged through storms, whispered judgments, and long days under the sun. The town could whisper, the storm could roar, but the horizon was theirs. And as the sunlight bathed them in gold, June understood fully. The story wasn't about being too big at all. It was about being enough, brave enough, steady enough, strong enough, loved enough, and with Eli by her side. She knew she could face any dawn, any storm, any whisper. She was exactly who she was meant to be, and that was more than enough.